Yeah,
Right.
Cody.
Well, hello, everyone. Before we begin today, I kind of want to spend a few minutes giving the bigger picture as far as what we're doing, why we're doing it this way, what some of the changes entail. Um, some of you are aware that I've been searching, I guess, for the right way to approach certain lessons, certain codings, and certain frequencies, making sure that everyone has the content so that we can actually have deeply esoteric conversations at some point in time and not always have to go back to the beginning or fill in the missing pieces, right? Um, Now, that also has to be balanced with something else. And that is, I don't want this to become like the university, where you sit down and you get subjected to a lesson and it gets kind of bashed into you. Yeah? And so, out of respect for the fact that it doesn't need to be bashed into people, um, I, I think there's a good compromise that's afoot. One is that we need to treat these meetings as live engagements, because I can give the same lesson 50, 60, maybe 70 different ways, and it'll still have the same frequency and signal with it, but it will be current for what we're engaged in today. It'll be current for the nature of the day. It won't be, the reading from the Eminent Bible, the scriptures like that. It's just like it just doesn't work anymore. Yeah. And so if you perused the website this morning, you'll probably see that I made a little change. And that change is this. It's not you can no longer pop in and watch lesson one, lesson two, wait a week, watch lesson 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, so on and so forth. There's a section now in there that is called Emin 1, and it's just one of the, how there's like various groups there's one called Emin 1, and within there you'll find the first 7 lessons that we did when we took a run at this back in 2022. And each of these engagements that we have together will be posted there so that you can go back and look at them, but they're just going to be called, Eminent Way members only meeting. Okay. It's not going to be lesson 17, lesson 22, and so on and so forth. Now I'll get to how we know when it's time to move on. Let me give you a bigger picture of the overall structure of things. Okay. There are, especially for those of you who were in or have watched the Enneagram aspect yesterday, the course we did on that. There is an exoteric, a mesoteric, and an esoteric side to this work. And right now we stand right at the beginning of the esoteric. Okay. Now, in addition to that, thinking about the triangle, right? So you've got this kind of like, here's the exoteric Enneagram, yeah, doing its Enneagramness. Within that, there is the 3 aspects of the triangle would be you, right? Each of you, the cosmos or the ecology in which you live, this universe, and the way itself. Okay, so what that means is that in an exoteric engagement, we spend approximately, there's approximately, well, I don't know how many codings are that need to be transmitted, but there are approximately 21 kind of general lessons that I want to give that gives the flavor and sense and signal and codings of the exoteric aspects of this type of engagement as it applies to you, the universe, and the way. Understand? So it's 777. You, the universe, and the way. And so, generally speaking, over the next 21 lessons, which is approximately a little over 5 months, we'll be taking an approach that's a bit guided by those principles, but not necessarily now, here is lesson 1. And part of the reason for that is because we don't know when someone's going to join in, do we? you all happen to be sitting right at the very first one as we reapproach this type of work, but someone could come join in a month or 2 months or 3 months from now. And what are we going to tell them? Sorry, you're going to have to wait until Pierce has another day to open up and start all over. See, that's just not going to work. So the way that this needs to be is it needs to be a weave of essences, a weave of various frequencies that come into play throughout each meeting, so that a person can start next week or 2 months from now and not feel hopelessly lost, and be able to catch the frequency of it. So as we approach this work together, one thing I want to encourage you to continuously come back to in your own assemblies is the idea of, you don't have to get it, you just have to be in the wash of it. All right, the codings, the frequencies, the signals are going to come across because they've been worked, and I have a very peculiar establishment with them. They've been coded in the astral light. They're there for you. You can access them. All right, but don't worry so much about must get lesson 17, must get lesson 23, must get lesson 1, those sorts of things. Okay, does that sound fair?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That sounds good. Yeah.
Yeah. Shall we open that up a bit more, or does that resonate with everyone? Happy to spend more time on it if need be. If there's questions.
Well, it reminds me of a web situation, Pierce. If you're on that web, in the esoteric, in the occult sense, things happen in the unseen worlds more than we realise. And if you like I say, if there's no attendance one day, you're in the wash of it. You're on the web, you're connected. I don't see why that shouldn't be, the way things work.
Yeah, right. And so what I'm trying to say here in this is that there is a group of signals that go with the exoteric phase of this work. There are a group of signals that go with the mesoteric, meaning middle circle, and there's a group of signals that go with the esoteric. We will go in that general order, because you have to sort of approach things in a certain way. You can't just pop right into the esoteric. First of all, it's impossible, because if you pop right into the esoteric, it's no longer esoteric, is it? That's what happened with fourth wave. So just be sensitive to the signals of it. Now, Enzi, I know you've kind of gone through a specific series of lessons, and you don't have to throw those out of your mind, but you're going to find that this has a bit more of a weave to it, so that we can kind of go back and forth across some of these topics that you've been exposed to. You and I can touch base offline as far as how to integrate what you've already done with this, but let's see, aside from Gary, who goes by Night, then everyone in this group has already had a run at this last year around what was it, April, May, June-ish kind of time frame.
Yeah, around that.
Yeah. And yet, our planet's going 40,000 miles an hour this way through space, and it's a different time. So what we can get to each time might be a little bit different. One of the things that I'm excited to see about this is that as we begin to grow this library that's only accessible to the subscribing members of the site, you can go back and you can say, oh, I remember something about this topic, and you can watch various facets of it, and it becomes less one-dimensional and more three-dimensional, or 4 or 5 or 6-dimensional, I suppose. We'll get to that lesson. It's a bit of a joke. Right. So that's that. Now, how do you know when you're ready to move on? Because I've basically separated it out into exo, meso, and esoteric aspects. And this brings to mind the question of initiations. And I do believe that in a work like this, there is no such thing as somebody initiating you. Like if you're part of the Martinist order or some other thing, You get to a certain point and they do their thing, right? They have their ritual, their procedures, and all this sort of thing. And they initiate you into something as if that's to say that you're ready. Maybe you are, maybe you aren't, maybe you're way ahead of it. Okay. All initiations are self-initiations. When you have the signal of it, when you begin to look at things kind of from the context or standpoint of the coatings that are being that we're washing in, that's the only initiation you need. Okay. And I think we'll pretty easily be able to figure out when it's time to move on to mesoteric aspects and topics and work. All right. So there's no pressure. It's not like 21 weeks from now on the day, mark it off on your calendars. 21 weeks from now, we're going to start doing mesoteric. More than likely, what will happen is we'll keep this one and then we'll open up a new day to begin to do mesoteric work, but we'll still keep this one. Yeah. And so you can pop into this and get refreshers on this type of work and jump into that and get new knowledge and learning and those types of things that go with that sort of work. Okay. Does that sound reasonable?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, good. So end that section. If you want to come back to it, we can. If there's some questions or whatever, totally fine with coming back to it. But I think it would be appropriate to kind of get into the nature of what this work is about, how it's different from investigation, how it's different from science, how it's different from a lot of other types of works or ways out there. And yeah, like why we're doing what we're doing. I think it is possible to take a scientific approach to the esoteric. I think it's possible, but I don't believe that it's actually ever been done. And the reason why I say that is because if you look at science from the standpoint of its more modern origins, starting in the 1400s and onward, maybe the 1100s and onward, it's really been geared towards predicting something. Yeah, if you want to go real far back in science, get the idea of a lever, for example, and someone realized that if they've got a boulder over here and they shove a board under it and they put a rock right here next to the board, they can do this and they can get this mechanical advantage, right? They can predict the fact that the heavy rock that they can't lift by themselves is going to rise. Same thing with gears. If you have a gear going this way and you push one up against it, it's going to go the opposite direction. These are all predictable aspects. And one of the things about the human condition, the human mind, is that we have a fear, don't we, of the unknown. We tend to have a fear of the unknown. And actually, all life does. And we recently got a puppy. Here in the household. And this observation came to me a few days ago when we had received a package and it came in a rather large box. And I needed to take that box out to the garage so I can break it down and all this, just an empty cardboard box. And I pick up the box and I come walking through the hallway with it. And the puppy has a fear response. And I thought, well, that's interesting. Boxes don't occur in nature. It's not like there's a print in dogs as far as ancient print as being afraid of boxes. And it dawned on me that there's a certain aspect of life that tries to achieve a balance between pushing past your fears and also being afraid of the unknown. Yeah, she looked at that box, she looked at me carrying the box, and it was so outside of her zone of comprehension that it caused a bit of a fear response. Perfectly natural. That's embedded in life, to look at something that you don't understand and immediately be afraid of it. There's also the opposite aspect of that too, which is to push to overcome those things, because that's where evolution happens. Evolution happens when you push past those fears, right? Set the box down for the dog, smells it, carefully approaches it, smells it a little bit, and that's an evolution for her, right? But we have the same feature in us as well. Once we come up against something that's different for us or unknown for us, we have to be able to approach it. You see, and here's where science has failed humanity in that regard, is that science isn't seeking the unknown, it's seeking to make the unknown known, or to make the unknown predictable. I want you to grab the weight of this, because you might say to me, Pierce, all of science is about exploring the unknown. We don't know how X, Y, or Z works, and we have to go investigate it. But the motive is different. The motive isn't to stand naked in the presence of the unknown, it's to make the unknown known. And there is another aspect to the universe, to God and creation, and this that we deal in, that actually is unknowable. And yet you're asked to stand in the presence of it. You see, how much courage does it take to be able to stand in something that you grasp cannot be fully known by you, that you can't necessarily predict the outcome of it? You might feel safe in it, but you don't know what's next. You don't know what's coming around the corner with that. Still, you feel safe in it, but do you understand the difference? Science is going one direction. Science is kind of going from the center. If you draw a circle, going from the center outwards, and it wants to explain, atoms and molecules, and it wants to explain levers and gears, and it wants to explain how the cosmos works, and all of these sorts of things. It's kind of constantly going outward, you see, looking at how do I explain the phenomenon around me. Esoteric science, what we're involved in, which is really just another way of saying away, does the opposite approach. It takes everything that we observe outwardly in our life and tries to understand the core of it. And I'll tell you, I've been at this a long time, and the core of myself, even though it's been possible to approach it, is still an unknown. And that's the beauty of it, because if you leave it as an unknown, then it leaves room for evolution, doesn't it? It leaves room for growth, and then there's a new unknown that you can approach, and a new one after that, you see. Yeah. So I would propose that any kind of esoteric approach is going to be from the outside in. And this is where we begin. Okay, we've had discussions about things like essence versus personality, and the 5 centers, and the 2 higher centers, and I think I've asked in a meeting before for everyone to raise their right hand, and everyone can successfully do that. Raise your left hand, everyone can successfully do that, and I say raise your soul, and everyone looks at me blankly, right? How do you raise your soul? And that's because we don't know what it is. We don't have a definition for it, do we yet? Or your spirit, for that matter. Yeah. Can you actually articulate the difference between your soul and your spirit? Are you able to do such a thing? Wouldn't it be nice to be able to do such a thing without saying Pierce said, or Leo said, or Orman said? That would be nice, wouldn't it? It'd be nice to go, yeah, just like you can raise your right hand, you know how to manipulate the forces of your soul, of the soul that inhabits you itself. You can do something with it. That's a good place to be, yeah, because it is part of you. But what stands in our way? Well, the fractured nature of I, of self, fractured nature of self. You see, we have this word in the English language. Well, every language, to be honest, has it, right? Referring to oneself, I did this. I'm going to eat breakfast. I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to attend an Eminent Way meeting. I. Right? We never actually stop to think. Or actually, let me put it this way. We don't stop and observe the fact that it is not the same I. You might have an I in you that says, Pierce, it'd be good to get up early and start, I don't know, we're working into something, right? Do a meditation, or, do some sit-ups, for crying out loud, something, right? You have this I that makes this promise to self and says, oh, well, yeah, sure. From now on, I'm going to start waking up at, instead of 4, I wake up at 3 and do my crunches or sit-ups or something. You go to bed at night, and the alarm goes off at 3 or 4 or whatever time you use that I set, and you go to hell with this. I'm not going to wake up and do that. Click, right? Off goes the alarm. And we sort of just pass by it. We pass by it. We go, oh, well, I changed my mind. Bullshit. You didn't change your mind. Another I jumped in and said, I've got to be me, right? Sang the song, jumped into your skin, and said, no, I have decided I'm not going to wake up now, right? And then later on in the day, you look down and you go, yeah, I'm still a little pudgy. And that I comes back and says, we should do sit-ups. You see, and it's this constant war. It's this constant war going on. And I'll tell you, it's not 2 or 3 or 5 of them. It's hundreds of them. And sometimes they'll make promises that your life can't keep. So every now and then you'll make an I will rear its ugly head and make a promise that really impacts the rest of your life. And then you enter into the realms of regret. You look back and you go, oh, I wish I had done this differently or that differently. People do this all the time. This is where regret comes from. I would probably say half the people that go to jail for punching somebody have a regret. They didn't mean to do that, but it's affected their life, hasn't it? So how is it that we can say I to anything? You see, a journey towards the esoteric absolutely must begin with a journey into self, and to start to look at these different I's in oneself. And to begin to name them. Not necessarily, Carl, Richard, Bob, Shelley, whatever. You don't have to name them like that. What I'm going to lay out for you today is a framework of how to begin to get to that point where you can look at these I's and begin to name them and call them out. Because if you begin to do that, you have to ask yourself the question, don't you, of what's looking? What is it that's looking? If there's an I that Pierce identifies, that has a certain kind of behavior that seems a bit foreign to the intention of this life, you have to be able to say, okay, what is that I? And also, what is it that observed that I? You see, and what this causes in time is it causes a separation of self from the milieu of I's. There becomes something, it starts off as a seed, but it eventually becomes a permanent feature in oneself. Where that I, its job is to look at and figure out all the other I's. Yeah. You follow so far?
Yes.
Yeah. You're causing, in the initial stages of a personal development journey such as this, you have to be able to separate out something from the rest of it. And this is why It's common in a work like this to have a self-chosen name. Yeah, my name in life is not Pierce, right? It's Chris. Chris has all those personalities. You see, does things. Pierce is a solid feature in this life. Pierce is a presence in this life. Yeah, that can look at the other aspects of it, and at this stage in my development can begin to sort out and choose what is useful and what's not useful. That's where it begins, you see, and it's you know, in the fourth way they called it self-observation. I would actually prefer to use the term introspection, because self-observation is a bit it's a bit nebulous, isn't it? Like, well, what the hell am I supposed to observe? Yeah, most of you, I think, have had this introduction to the idea of self-observation, observing yourself. Introspection is a bit more accurate of a term for it, right? Having a watcher and the watched within you at all points in time, as often as you can remember to do so. Now, who's tried to do that and has found that it's really easy when you first start and then becomes increasingly more difficult as you continue on? Huh? I have. That's tough. It's tough. We'll get into what makes it more possible when the time comes. But for right now, I think what I would like to get across is just this idea that we are legion, as they say, yeah, that we are many within us, that these personalities that parade around as, you know, Pierce and Hannah and Mark and Sam, Sachin and Enzi, Knight and Pleiades. It's not quite real yet, is it? Right? Is there a chief feature in oneself that can last through all of these different types of transitions? The analogy has been given before of a vial, a jar filled with iron filings. Okay, and the iron filings are in a state of mechanical mixture, and this jar is on the back of a cart, yeah, drawn by a horse or a car or anything you like. And every time you hit a bump in the road, the iron filings shift. This is what people's personalities are like. It's, you know, 1 minute you've got these bits on top, and the next minute a bump comes along in your life and you've got these bits on top and these have shifted to the side. And it's this constant change. And the terror of the situation is honestly that we don't even know this is the case. We don't know this about ourselves until someone comes along and says, actually, you're like this, you know, and so am I, by the way, right? And what's the reason for that? Why don't we know this? How is it that we can go 50 years in my case and not know that we're like this? Some people go 70, 80, 90 and never realize that they have no permanent self, that it's constantly whatever self gets bumped to the surface based on the conditions of life. What do you think? I'm asking. I'll stop my ramble and I'll actually ask a question, okay? Yeah. What do you think? Why don't we know this?
Do people assume that it's not the case? Do people assume that there is only one eye? Are people just not aware that there's multiple competing eyes?
Well, you know, Knight, if you spend more than 3 or 4 hours in a state of introspection, watching your own behavior from moment to moment, it becomes very obvious. And if you do it genuinely, it becomes very obvious. Not you, I'm just saying a person, yeah. And yet, an individual can go through their entire life all the way up to the moment of death and never have that that realization.
Yeah.
So how is that possible? It's not just that they assume that they have an eye. There is, what I'm trying to get at here is that there is something preventing people from seeing it. You know what that's something?
I'll throw something out. I'll say there is no need for the intent to do this work. There is
You're
no
right
need.
about that.
So, I mean, people could go through their life without really recognizing that there is a need for doing this work. So they have to first recognize there is a need for it. Yeah. And then they actually have to act to fulfill that or make progress on fulfilling some of that need, which never really gets fulfilled because it's meant to not be fulfilled.
Yeah.
And so, they do your point of you go a little further up and then it gets harder. Well, it gets harder because your need has somewhat been fulfilled, but not fully. There's still a need, but it's a difficult need. So you have to put more intent, more effort, and there's no motivation for that because it's needed. Maybe it's not a need. Maybe at that point it becomes a want. You need to want to do this work. Otherwise, there's no motivation for it.
You know what's missing from paths like the Fourth Way and the Eminent, actually, in general? What's missing from paths like that is the idea, the actual knowledge of something higher in oneself. And not in oneself. Let me put it differently. In creation. Whether you want to call it God or anything you like. Personal development at some point in time hits a stage where it's no longer personal. You're doing it for something else. You're doing it as an act of service to humanity in some cases, to the planet herself in other cases, to the solar system in some cases, yeah, and to the Milky Way galaxy and beyond. You see, it's not necessarily about self. What you're touching on, Sachin, is a very important concept of this idea that we're actually mechanical. We're actually machines. If you look at the fundamental purpose, fundamental feature, chief feature of everything living, whether it be single-cell organisms or a plant or a human being or a horse or a dog or a cat or a chicken or whatever, they all have one thing in common. They're processing machines. They take things that are of a baser nature, they reorganize them with some outside energy, and they produce something that is of a higher order, a higher nature, a higher structure. Yeah, you take like this orchid behind me. Yeah, that didn't appear. Let me grab that. I'll bring it closer. Yeah. Okay. This orchid, just realize how amazing this is. It was manufactured, right? Some germ of life made that out of things like, well, not oxygen, but the carbon in the air that we breathe, carbon dioxide, right? Pulls the oxygen out, takes a bit of sunlight, jams certain molecules together, creates form and structure that's easily identifiable, that this is an orchid and not a daffodil or a rose or a blade of grass, right? It's creating order out of disorder. That's the chief feature of life, you see. And we can get into the whole lesson on entropy and why that's important to create order out of disorder, but just put in your minds for the moment that without life in the universe, everything would wind down. Yeah, the planet's spinning at a certain velocity right now, but eventually science predicts it's going to come to a standstill and all of the orbits will collapse and our solar system will collapse into its sun and our sun will collide with the closest star and give it hundreds of trillions of billions of years in the future, and everything will return to some quantum singularity. But it doesn't. It's not going to. And the reason why is because there is something that keeps the top spinning. Yeah, you know what I mean? You spin a top and eventually it kind of wobbles and stops. Yeah, the universe isn't like a top. It was engineered with consciousness and with life in order to keep the top spinning. But now that is a mechanical function. And you see that a person can live their life eating food, excreting waste for other things to eat, and even in the realms of connecting with certain influences that cause certain emotions that other things eat when they get exuded, or thoughts that other things eat when they get exuded, like in dreams, for example. You see, have you ever thought about this? Something comes along and eats your dreams, a dream eater, yeah, an emotion eater. I mean, it happens on the physical levels, doesn't it? Right? Who's to say, or why wouldn't it happen all throughout? But you get to a point where if this is really the case, you have to ask yourself, well, what am I then? You know, if I'm just on this planet to produce the human vibe, the human energy, to produce, to eat cheeseburgers and grow a pentagramic structure, 5 fingers, 5 toes, pentagramic structure, where do I fit into this? And you start to see that you are basically, at one level, I should say, you are basically a cog in a machine. The planet needs humans, therefore there are humans on this planet. It needs things of a pentagramic structure that can emote and think and philosophize and eat cheeseburgers and excrete and sweat and everything else that goes along with being a human. Let's see. Where I'm going with this is that if you touch the core of that, that's a very staggering thought, because it will leave you with the idea of what am I? And I think anyone who's honest with themselves at the beginning of a personal development journey is going to have to come to the conclusion that they're not much, really. You know, and that's hard to hear. This goes back to my question. What is it that prevents us from seeing the absolute horror of the fact of our non-entityness? The fact that we have no will, or if we have a will, it's only because we couldn't help it. Yeah. Some people go climb Mount Everest not because they have iron wills, but because they can't help it. There's something else driving them to do it. It still doesn't mean it's a conscious effort. It's not, to you or I, it might be because, that would take an incredible amount of will for us to do it. For them, it's probably a fact of, it would take an incredible amount of will for them not to, but it's still a mechanical action on their part. Yeah. It's just how they're wired. Somebody has to do it. The planet needs someone who has climbed Mount Everest, you see. And so there's a certain structural engineering that goes into a person that does that, and they're acting out on that. They're not in control. The thing that prevents us from seeing the horror of the situation in this regard is that we lie to ourselves. That's the number one feature. Yeah, you could probably sum up humanity as a type of simian that lies, both to everyone else and to themselves. Yeah, type of ape that lies to everything, lies about everything. I'm being a bit funny in this, but it's true, right? I mean, and in the work we call this buffers. Yeah. It's very difficult to see yourself as you are because we have buffers in place, and those buffers are called the lies we tell ourselves. And I've said this before, you don't have to be truthful with anybody in your life, including me, but be truthful with yourself. That's the most important part. You see something about yourself as you begin this journey of watching these different parts and this self-observation. Acknowledge it. You don't have to speak it to anybody, but acknowledge it. Know what you're like. Okay, now, do you remember how we talked about fear of the unknown? If you're feeling a sense of fear now about that, that's probably a good place to be. because it's very difficult to face oneself and say, wow, this is actually what I'm like. You know? But it's also a vital step in this process. Yeah, it's lies, buffers, lies. We don't want to be like that, right? I mean, we spend the majority of our lives putting on an act, don't we? We have to not be ridiculed in this world, and to make ends meet at the very least, let alone becoming wealthy, right? You have to put on certain acts and make people, what do they call it? Perception management. We forget that we don't need perception management with ourselves. We need perception, not management. Perception of ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's tough. Very tough. Sobering, really. Now, let's go back to the analogy of the iron filings for a minute, because it's an analogy in this work for a reason. Iron has this feature that when it gets hot, it melts and becomes solid. Well, when it gets hot and then cools again, it can become a block of iron instead of iron filings. This is what you're looking for in the work. You can't say I, really. You can say I to people around you, but you can't say I to yourself, excuse me, while you're a bunch of iron filings. It's only when you create a certain amount of friction in your life, a certain amount of heat in those iron filings, that you get to the point where it then crystallizes or solidifies. And I've used other analogies too. Knight, you had asked a question about the the supersaturated solution thing that I had written on the website, right? Same thing, really. Same ingredients are necessary, but how do we get enough friction? This is the important question, because usually what happens in life when a person starts to face who they are or what they are, actually is a better way to say it, they seek comfort. Yeah, they want to avoid that feeling, because personal development is not like, I'm personally developed, I feel so great. It's hard work. Personal development is very challenging, very facing. Most people will start a personal development journey, and when they get the first glimpse of what they are, will back away from it or run away from it. Yeah. Or create a whole slew of new lies to say it's not true. It's not what I am. It's not how I am. Yeah. The idea of heat, of this kind of friction in oneself to be able to fuse those iron filings into a single whole, that heat is generated through introspection, but I should say honest introspection, the kind of introspection where you will not face away from what you see. You will not look away from what you see. You will keep that fire going until it becomes something that you can work with. And the time will come, okay? It doesn't last, but it is hard while it's hot. Yeah, when the heat is on, it's not easy. Just try not to face away from it. That's what most people do. And really, the reason why we lie is, again, because we're under the influence of a planet that needs pentagrammic humans eating cheeseburgers and creating complexes and emoting and dreaming and sneezing and everything else we do, right? It needs these types of machines. If all humans were to suddenly evolve, she would have to immediately evolve another species on the planet to be pentagrammic and to fulfill this conscious role of humanity. There are certain safety mechanisms in place to prevent that from happening. It's often been likened to a prison, where if you've got a prison with 1 million or 1 billion or 7 billion or 9 or whatever we're up to now, 9 billion, I think, something like that, 9 billion prisoners in it, and 1 or 2 of them escape, probably the planet won't notice. Listen, I said this yesterday. It comes from an understanding of natural law. You have a liver, Each of you have livers and lungs and hearts and intestines and everything else. You have organs, right? And generally speaking, your organs maintain the same shape and function throughout your entire existence, don't they? I mean, you know, aside from catastrophic failure, your liver is always going to be kind of a liver, and yet not the same liver you had 7 years ago. Not at all. Every cell in that liver has been replaced. If you were to lose a couple hundred cells from your liver wouldn't notice, your body wouldn't notice, your complex wouldn't notice. But if you lose your whole liver, it notices. You see? Same thing happens with the planet. A few people can escape, a few people can, you know, reach escape velocity, leave the liver, yeah, and personally develop, but you can't have everybody do it all at once. And this really flies in the face of the New Age movement, doesn't it? Yeah, the age of Aquarius, right? Everyone's going to become enlightened. Everyone's going to become enlightened and we'll all sort of evaporate. Yeah. Yeah. Can't happen. Not in this epoch anyway. Okay. So not only is what you're trying to do very difficult from the inside, because you have to be very facing of yourself, but it's also difficult from the outside because the planet has mechanisms in place to try and prevent you from doing it. Otherwise, everybody would. Boy, I tell you, if everyone could wake up and see the predicament they're in, we would all rebel instantly. Thank God we can't. Thank God we don't, as a species, I should say. Yeah, so brutal self-honesty, okay? Don't worry about other people. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter whatsoever. That's what matters. Introspection, honest introspection. All right, let's talk about the structure a little bit. Most of you have heard of the 5 centers. You've got the thinking, the moving, the instinctive, the emotional, and the sexual center. And these are kind of the organs of your psychological life, if you will. The internal organs of your psychological life, those 5. Right now, in the beginning, we're really only concerned with 3 of them, because they need to be fixed first. And that would be the thinking center, the moving center, and the emotional center. Okay. What does the thinking center do? Anybody?
Reasons?
Yeah, sure. Reasons, thinks, cogitates, contemplates, all these things. What does the emotional center do?
Like and dislike. Certain degree of balancing.
Huh?
A certain degree of balancing. Comparison.
The emotional center? You're getting too esoteric.
That's a thinking. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. No, that is actually held within the possibility of what the emotional center can do. What does it do in most people now? It emotes, right? Thinking center thinks, emotional center emotes. It gets crabby, it falls in love, it gets sappy, it cries, it gets irritable, it does the whole gambit of things that an emotional center can do. And I'll tell you, the thinking center can't understand it. Can't understand a word it's saying most of the time, and vice versa. The emotional center cannot understand a thing the thinking center is talking about half the time. Have you ever been in this predicament where you're feeling angry about something, but you know you shouldn't be angry about something? Yeah, this kind of fight that goes on within us. That's a symptom of lack of unity, really. Let's move on though. The moving center, what do you think it does? If the thinking center thinks, hold on, let's back up. Okay, what's olive oil made of? Olives, right? They make it with olives, right? What's I don't know, name it, right? Vegetable oil made of? It's made of vegetables. Right? Yeah. What's baby oil made of? Right. Hopefully not babies. Yeah. But in this case, the moving center moves. The thinking center thinks. Right? The emotional center emotes, and the moving center moves. That's as simple as I want you to take it over this next week-ish. All right. Begin to watch yourself, introspect on yourself. Don't get complicated. You walk to the kitchen to warm up your coffee or tea or whatever you're drinking. You take a drink of it. What did that?
Emotional center.
Yeah, it's the moving center, right? You have to look at it and go, right, that's the moving center in action. It sounds too simple to be effective, but trust me when I say this is where you must begin. You must begin by informing this observing part of you what the other parts are. That was a moving center. Right? You get irritable. Go, that's the emotional center, getting irritable. It'll take you out of it eventually, by the way. You get brainy, you start to think, you start to philosophize or cogitate on something. Remember to stop yourself and go, that's the thinking center. Okay, only 3 names right now is all you need to know. Don't worry about your instinctive center or your sexual center at this point. It doesn't matter. Primarily because the instinctive center doesn't exist. It's part of the moving center. It's just the other half of the moving center. And the sexual center in most people is too messed up to deal with anyway at this point, right? It has to get sorted out later. So we'll do that later. But yeah, that's it. All right. Don't worry about identifying. I've given lessons, haven't I, on look at your facial expressions. Yeah, observe your facial expressions, observe your posture, observe your gestures, your tone of voice, all of these types of things. We'll get to that later. Right now, very easy basic categories. Is this moving? Is this emotional, or is this thinking? That's it. Okay. Later on, once you get accustomed to doing that, and it becomes part of your moving center, in other words, it becomes part of your habitual life, then you can begin to identify those separate eyes. And I'll tell you, there are hundreds of them, but you can begin to get a flavor of, that's eye number 378, or that's eye number 12, or something like that. As you go through the day and switch roles. Do you really think, if you have a boss, right, work or whatever, or you are your boss and you're talking to a customer, are you the same with everyone? Are you the same with everyone? No, we're not, right? We're different with our spouses and our loved ones and our children and our bosses and our employees and our customers and our the person standing behind us in the line and the checkout clerk. And we're different, constantly different. We'll get to those later, but you will actually get a sense of those, and you'll have to again face that reality of, oh my gosh, there's a lot of me's running around claiming to be me in this complex. We'll get there. Are you willing to start simple though? Just over the next, over the next 7 days, just as often as you can remember. Now, a couple things are going to happen. You're going to forget. You're going to walk away from this meeting and you're going to remember, right? For the first 30 minutes, maybe an hour, you'll remember. But then something will bump your jar of iron filings and another eye will come to the surface and you'll completely forget about it for hours. And then something will trigger another bump in you, and this will come back to the surface. And I want you at that point in time to remember that you forgot. Okay, remember that you forgot. This is so important. Go, wow, 7 hours just passed and I haven't thought about this one bit. Because what this is evidence for yourself. This is self-facing evidence that you can say, yeah, I'm not I. It's not I should say. Yeah, it's going to happen. All right. If it doesn't happen, ring me up and I'll start scheduling time with you so that I can learn. Okay, because it happens to me even. It's a journey. It's a journey. right? Happens less and less as you get further along, but it happens. Okay. Let's spend a few minutes talking about certain aspects of the self. The primary organ of expression and perception for the moving center is the body. Okay, so if you touch something, if you have a pain, if whatever the case is, if it's body related, it means your moving or instinctive center, which is the other half of the moving center, is involved in the process. Right? That is one of you. It's one of the true eyes of self. You understand? Yeah, it's interesting, right? We as humans look at our bodies as though they're the third person. You know, what's wrong? Oh, my right arm aches. Not I ache, my right arm aches, right? My left foot, my body is tired, right? We look at it almost like it's not part of us, it's third person. Most people don't know what their soul is, but they talk about it in third person anyway. My soul, you know, my soul hungers for chicken soup. Stupid book reference, right? Yeah, right. My soul this, my spirit this. Where's the I in you? Let's clear up a couple things, okay? This is your body, all right? This is it. This is your body. Your soul is on loan from the planet. It inhabits you during the course of your life. How do I put it? I'll put it the way the ancient alchemists put it. Okay, they call it sulfur. Yeah, they call it sulfur, but what they really meant by that was essential oil. When they were making, as I recently did, making oregano oil, you see, if I put oregano in the flask and run it through the whole process, I don't expect to get rose oil out in the end, do I? No, I get something that smells like oregano and tastes like oregano and is oregano. It's the essence of oregano. That's what your soul is. Okay? Does that kind of make sense? It's the essential oil of you. Hopefully it's not baby oil, but you know what I'm saying, right? It's the essentialness of you. That's your soul. And it's dolloped in as you're being manufactured in your mother's womb, dollops in. You keep it and cook with it and do everything else you do with it for the majority of your life. And then the planet says, thank you very much, takes it back, throws it back into a bigger pot, Topeth, and does it all over again. Yeah. If you show back up at your birthday, talking about recurrence now, if you show back up, you get a similar dollop. Doesn't always remember the same stuff, but it usually comes from a close place in the jar so that it can have that essence of you. And Mark, your essential oil is different than mine in the way that it's been cooked through life. Okay, it's not like if you pressed us out, we'd both smell like oregano. You'd smell like Mark and I'd smell like Pierce. You understand? All right. Yeah. Now, the spirit is different. Chana, we had a discussion about this once. No one's clear on what the spirit is. The spirit is the same for everybody. Think of it in terms of alcohol, okay, or ethanol, going back to the idea of alchemy. Ethanol, it doesn't matter if I make it with grapes, if I make it with, grass, leaves, anything. It's always going to come out as ethanol. It's the same. Doesn't matter what you start with. That's what the human spirit is. That comes from the sun level. All right. And let me put this in too. When I say the soul, let's go back to the soul for a minute. It's not just the planet Earth. It's her plus the other planets that influence you in your astrological chart. All right. That's the essence of you. That's where you get your soul from. Certain codings from where the position of things, they all go. Here's a little bit. Yeah. Maybe Jupiter's not really in yours, but a speck of it goes in, and Mars goes in full force like me. Old Aries, right? Things like that. Okay. That's the soul. It's all planetary. Spirit is a solar thing. It's the same for everybody. All right. So when I say my spirit is talking to your spirit, it's really just reflection on self, isn't it? There's no difference. It's where we're all connected in that aspect. So body, definitely this planet. Soul, all planets. Spirit, sun. And then there's higher things, but not really. We'll get into that another time. More when we start to touch on the cosmos aspect of things, and we'll start talking about side octaves and how really you cannot develop beyond the sun. You can only have resonance beyond the sun, but we'll get there, okay? All right, so what's the homework? Wait, okay. Body, you got. Soul, you got. Now listen, don't take my word for it. I'm just putting it out there as, you can say in your mind, Pierce says this. All right, just say Pierce says that. Don't tell anyone else Pierce says that, because then you're portraying knowledge that isn't yours. All right, but put it in the burner and see if it makes sense as time goes on. If you can verify that your soul comes from the planet plus the other planets and so on. All right, we're not going to get into this Pierce says this or Leo says that nonsense anymore. That time has passed. Your centers. Are you clear on what your centers are? Yeah. They're not only the ports and expression and organs of your body, but they're also the organs of expression for something called your personality. Your essence, or your soul, you can interchange those words, we've talked about what that is. Your personality is everything you had to learn. Personality is everything that you weren't born with. All right. You were born with your soul. You were not born with your personality. It comes from peers. It comes from going to school. It comes from things that you read. I will caution you to be careful about not letting this type of work get into your personality. This should be more towards the line, along the lines of soul food. But that's a mistake people make. Yeah. I did. Listen, when I was in the Emin, what an annoying young man I was. I'm just an annoying old man, but what an annoying young man I was, right? Because I thought I knew it all. I had all the lessons. I heard everything, and I was so filled up with this lesson and that lesson and this and that, and the ushers, for those of you that have been in the Emin, the ushers that limp around the hall like they have a leg injury. Yes. Or speaking a phony accent, right? An accent that's not them. It's because it landed in their personality. Leo had a leg injury, okay? Right? The ushers that walk around as though they have a stiff leg, that's a problem, you see. That means that it landed in the personality. Same thing with the here in America, we get a lot of folks with personality engraved British accents that would probably make your skin crawl. As actual Brits over there. Right? It's personality, you see. It's everything that's not you that's been painted upon you. Okay? That's personality. And that's where all the I's live also. The I of you, the real I of you, without quotation marks, would be in the essence, in your soul. And the cosmic I that you're trying to connect with would be in the spirit. It's the same across the board. All right? I'm going to decompress now for a minute and open it up for questions, comments. If there's some clarity that needs to take place, then please, yes, Knight. You have your hand up. Yeah.
Can we be sure, Pierce, that the soul is intact? Original as born? I don't know quite how to think about that. It may be things that I've heard or I half heard. So basically, you spoke about the astrological aspect of the soul, where the planets were aligned when you were born. Is it likely that's still intact?
Is it likely that's still intact?
Yes.
Yeah, it actually is
Okay.
likely.
Okay.
It is likely.
Okay.
I'm trying to think of what could damage the soul, and the truth is that there's so much personality protecting it, very little can damage it.
Okay.
If you think of the personality and the soul like an egg, okay? You've got the essence of the person, the soul of the person inside, and then around that you have this albumen, I think is what they call it in an egg, right? The white part of the egg. The bird, or any life form that's egg based, the bird, when it is growing, consumes the white, right? It starts off as that germ in the middle, and it eventually consumes that outer layer. That's what a personal development journey is like.
I see.
Can your soul grow? Yes. Can it be damaged? I don't really see a good way to that happens, because it's not really yours to begin with to damage, you see, and it's electrical. Probably the worst that can happen to it is that it just suffocates under a personality. So
Here's,
much.
can I suggest thought here? And I was doing some thinking, and quite a bit of thinking about
That's
this.
that.
So, so at the thinking center, this was definitely the thinking center.
Yeah.
So I was like trying to put some patterns. Like there's four. What I've seen is there's like four things that can affect deeper than the personality. And the four things are tied to the centers. There's a thinking center, the moving center, the emotion center. But in our culture, there's I'm going to come up with a new term, a financial center. Right? Any of these four centers traumatized or affected in a very strong way can have a change or an impact on the soul. That impact.
Please continue.
Yeah, so that I don't think that impact is permanent, because the soul is supreme over all these things that are personality. Given time, the soul will go back to what its pure, pristine form is. So I don't think damage is the right word. I think it can be influenced or changed, and that depends on how big of a event it was for those four centers.
Okay.
So that's some thinking.
If we were in the right kind of ecology, I would show you an experiment, okay, that is very much doable and requires a great deal of trust to do. If someone were willing to do it, I would show you an experiment where you can actually take, I'm talking electrically, with a person, take the personality and move it to the side and see what that essence is. And most people, that essence acts about like a 2-year-old, because that's the point in time when most people's essence stopped developing. You see, we're not meant to do that as humans. We're meant to go through the angst of teenage years, accumulating as much personality as we possibly can. I have nothing against personality, by the way. It's useful, like the white that surrounds the egg, yeah? But we're supposed to go through our teenage years gathering as much personality as possible. And then once we hit maturity, begin that reversal process where we consume the personality to enhance our essence. Okay, but there are some things that can damage a person's soul. One would be overcooking. Getting involved in certain types of spiritual practices that can bleed off and evaporate aspects of one's soul. But it is very, very hard to do. Very hard to do. And you can damage a life with a pseudo esoteric journey to where they have to start over. It's called recrystallizing, right? They have to be melted down and recrystallized in a proper way. An example of that would be things like self-flagellation, right? Where like these religious orders that wear, things, barbed wire on their legs that cut into them, or they beat themselves continuously. That can deform the soul aspect of a person. But you see the kind of what's required to do that at that point. The reason why is because they wanted something crystallized that could reincarnate into something else. But it's it's a monstrosity. Yeah, best it could do would probably be to reincarnate into a cow or a cat or something. So yeah, I don't think you can really easily damage the soul.
Okay.
Usually you just coat it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But Sachin, I'll keep
Sachin,
thinking about it. Oh, I'm sorry, 1 second, Knight. I'll keep thinking about that, Sachin. It's a good question, isn't it?
I agree with you. I agree with you
Yeah,
that I don't think you can damage. You might impact or influence the soul, but you cannot permanently damage it. It's just like is this supreme entity, on a loan from a higher, creation that is going to revert back to its. If the way it reverts back is by ending this body, then so be it, right? But it's eventually going to revert back to its pure, sort of permanent form, which is you can't damage it. It will go through cycles. It'll go through several births, several, solidification, crystallization in your life due to influences from your centers. But it's not going to be permanent. It's going to go back. It's going to go back. But like, yeah, Piers would love to hear. Good, very good question, Gary. I think. Very
thought-provoking. I'll let it cook. I'll let it cook. It's an excellent question. Yeah.
Thank you.
Knight. You had something.
Yeah, just following on from what Sachin was saying about the financial center. I think that's where I've heard it mentioned, the phrase to become rich, they blunted their soul. And I think that's the reference that I've got from somewhere. Anyway, there was just one other thing to ask if nobody else has got a question to ask, if nobody minds.
No, go on.
Sure. It was to do with what Piers was saying about the planet wouldn't want too many humans escaping at the same time. If somebody was very highly developed, let's say, to throw some big names in here, Leo, Gurdjieff, or whoever.
I'm offended.
Piers, having
Go on.
Having achieved that, would the planet not want to keep those sort of people anyway?
See, listen, the planet sometimes doesn't have a choice.
Right. Okay.
Because she is under the governance, order, and dominion of something higher herself.
Yes,
okay?
Of course.
And so assuming a being ends up at their death with the majority of weight in the solar realms, they have a choice if they wish to participate in a different aspect of one of the rays of creation on this planet, right? We're talking about, like, there's the maintenance ray, the custodial, and so on and so forth. Not so on and so forth. There's 3 of them, aren't there? If they choose to participate in that particular ray, they can come back and they can live a life like that, right? But contrary to popular opinion, they have to start over. It's a very risky proposition.
Right.
No, I know the rumors that have been spreading around here and there, but Leo was not born Leo. He had to work for it. And if Leo comes back as a duty man or lady, he would have to work for it each and every time. That's the rules. You got to play by the rules of the ecology. Yeah. Bit of a head start because you've got tuning forks, but that's about the only thing that will carry with you. 2 ways, 2 forks to ways. Yeah.
Thank you, Piers.
I don't think anyone would want Gurdjieff back.
No. It's well, the planet is too unpredictable. It's too degenerate in its current state to guarantee a success.
You know what Gurdjieff did?
No.
So this is the service that I thank Gurdjieff for. He was able to preserve the signal of what was contained in certain monasteries for a generation that was completely not interested in God and creation. You see, his mission happened on the heels of the Industrial Revolution, where science was the God. No one wanted to hear about God and creation. They wanted to hear about science. And so what Gurdjieff did was take all of the old concepts, such as air, earth, water, fire, right? The 4 elements kind of thing, excuse me, and rebrand them as carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, and hydrogen. You see, this is where we get this idea of hydrogen being fire, carbon being earth, nitrogen being oxygen, air, and what I miss, and oxygen being water. You see, now the ancient alchemists were saying, yeah, these are the 4 primal elements. Gurdjieff came out, and everyone's scratching their heads like, oh, where does all this come from? And it sounds so much like chemistry. It's got chemistry as a cover because that was its cloak. Yeah, that's what was interesting to people at the time. And mathematics. There's mathematics now applied to things like the ray of creation, when the source where Gurdjieff got it from just had different terminology. Gurdjieff didn't come with anything new, but he was able to cause a bridge, right, to make works like what I'm doing today possible, for example. So I thank him for that.
Yeah.
But he was also such a it doesn't matter anyway. Yeah, whatever. Did that help though?
Certainly did. Thank you for
Sure.
Excellent. You put it excellently. Thank you.
Did you all know that about the carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, and hydrogen and all that? It's just rebranding.
I didn't know that. That's excellent. Excellent.
It will open up a lot of what he was actually saying.
Yeah. I mean, I've tried to look into Gurdjieff's work a little bit, and I can't make any inroads into it whatsoever.
Sure.
And I came to the conclusion, rightly or wrongly, I put my hands up here, that if Gurdjieff did have something, he really struggled to transmit it and to put it across.
Listen, it wasn't his mission to do so.
Right.
It was only his mission to put it in the astral light so that it had continuance for generations like ours. This is why you've got these 4th way groups stumbling around like morons.
Yes. Yeah.
To put it lightly, trying to do what Gurdjieff did, without any kind of understanding or foundation for what it was that he was trying to transmit. I think Ouspensky probably knew what Gurdjieff was up to, which is why he parted ways with him in the end. Yeah, didn't want to have anything to do with it. Made amends at the end of his life, but that wasn't Gurdjieff's mission to transmit a way. It was a bridge to another time.
I see.
Yeah. And Mark, this will have special significance for you because people like the folks Orridge and Nickel and Bennett and Ouspensky and all of these folks that were part of Gurdjieff's mission could very easily get trapped in a reincarnation cycle. In that, very easily get trapped in that. And not be living their own life, but just be, like Groundhog Day, be living that life over and over and over again, as elements of a planet of repetition, planet of ores, or system of ores, where in order to preserve the signal in the astral light, something has to be in repetition. So there has to be a motor behind it. So no Gurdjieff, I would say no Gurdjieff, but don't get locked into it. Easy to do.
Yeah.
Very easy to do. Yeah. You have to have a certain resistance to it, actually.
Yeah.
Go on, Mark.
Yeah. One of the things is that unless a person has got the same references and experiences, like with what Gurdjieff was trying to, if you like, draw from all of those monasteries and be able to put it across in a new way, unless somebody has got the same experiences as Gurdjieff. I think this is what you're saying, Knight, that it's hard to get into and understand what Gurdjieff was trying to put across, because without those same experiences and foundations, it just wouldn't have anything to, no, you wouldn't have those things to build the connection from those foundations.
Yes.
That-
Listen, it can't anchor in someone who's not safe.
Yeah.
It cannot
Sorry,
anchor. It cannot anchor in someone who's not safe with it.
Yeah. Or
Okay.
experience. Yeah.
The only option is if someone isn't safe with it, then they either go mad with it or they go into service to it. You see, but it cannot be promoted by someone who's not safe with it. And someone who's safe with it also has to have a resistance to it, meaning that they have to be above it. That their origin, what they're about in their life, has to be above the codings of the fourth way.
Yeah. There's also a third possibility when you're saying about not being safe and so on, is that a person could just repeat.
Yeah,
without
that's what I said, in service to it.
It's just empty words.
In service to it. That's what I said. That's
what I
meant.
What I meant was that in service to it, to me, says that there is a certain degree of connection and it's an automatic. Okay, right.
Mechanical, right?
Yeah.
It can't have the kind of.
I think.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think what Mark is saying is, it's. I think you're saying the same thing. I think you're saying mechanical. Mark is saying automatic. I think what he's meaning is without really thinking, intentionally thinking to get into the spiritual realms. This is just it's a habit, or it's like we're just saying it's mechanical, thoughtless, automatic, which is what Mark is saying. I think we both say the same thing.
Fair enough. Right.
Yeah, I think that what I was, to just take that a bit further, being in service to something, you're actually going to get a result of that process, as opposed to just parroting off, as has been said already tonight, that the problem of Pierce said, Gurdjieff said, Theo said, because they're not even in service because they haven't connected to that thing, they're just putting concepts across without anything of any substance to it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. You're right.
Yeah. So
That's right.
an observation about tonight.
Yeah.
When we went into spirit and soul, what I was watching in me is that every time these areas are spoken about, there is a part of me that goes, yeah, we're finally going to start to understand it more. And there's another part of me going, well, that don't tie up with this and that don't tie up with that. And I'm watching this going on. And it is, from what I've seen, this is one of the big areas in these studies that has this pull and resistance. There's this desire to really want to understand it, and by that I mean have that to be standing under, so that you can know it, get those perceptions, with also that, I suppose it's coming from the personality because it's from experience, that there's like a comparison analysis that's going on between what is being said at that time and what we've heard in the past,
right?
Whether it's in Yemen, in the church, where it's temples, and I just wanted to put that in, that this is something that I've observed not only today but previously, that almost contradiction of wanting to know, wanting to be with it, and also that resistance of saying, no, I still haven't got it, no matter how it's put across. I wanted to say this as a recognition that this is what goes on, particularly in this area, so that with what we've been saying about being aware of what's going on, is so important. And one of the things I do is that when I spot things, I don't just think in my head, that's that going on. That's that going on. I actually speak it out loud so that it's also going in through ears and whatever else in the complex is also aware that I've spotted it.
Brilliant.
Yeah. As soon as I say that, it's like, you said the word, I spotted it. Yeah. But the whole thing of not just having it in my head about what I've just spotted, but to actually speak it out so that other parts of me can be aware that that has been spotted.
Yeah, you raised some good things. I've often kind of struggled with this idea, right? Do we just throw out words? Just throw them away. Words like soul and spirit. I mean, yes, we can keep body. This is certainly what the alchemists were trying to do when they named the soul sulfur and the spirit mercury. Right? The reason why they did that is because, well, the word soul and spirit have been around forever. There's so much loading in the astral light, no one knows what the hell they're talking about when they say it. Yeah. But at least the alchemists, when they wrote about it, could say, you know, mercury condensing, yada, 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 and give very specific instructions. And it was the internal idea that, you know, it's talking about my spirit. Salt being the body, you see, salt, mercury, sulfur, the three aspects of this. It's not a bad idea, but only necessary if we can't come to some actual understanding of that. Yeah. Because you trust me. Well, don't trust me. Forget that. Don't trust me. Just hang in there and see in the end, if I'm not right, that you can do something with your soul. Yeah. Just see in the end, okay, that you can actually have a sensation of what your spirit is and do something with it. You know, just like I say, raise your right hand, you know how to do that. Yeah? Can I say, make your spirit flare? Do you know how to do that? You can. This is what I'm saying. Just hang in there. Yeah. Don't trust me. That was a poor choice of words.
In some ways, yes, and in some ways, no, because
I know
the trust comes from a feeling and a knowing and a registration that
and experience with me
is safe.
Yeah.
And I don't know, is it wise to use new words, or is it wise to use spirit and soul? Is that too big a thing to try to rewrite in the astral light what it actually is? Is that biting off too much? Because one of the things I'm really uncomfortable in another way is this thing of the refusal to use the word soul, but to use the word core. And it so is unsettling. There's something in me that is going, no. Partly because I don't know what the purpose behind that is. But it just seems right to use those words and to actually understand, stand under, experience, know what those two, pardon the clumsiness of this, those two things are. Yeah.
If you choose to overwrite that in the astral light, I think that's really between you and your God. Yeah.
Right.
But the most important thing would be just making sure that it's correct in your own astral light, in your own aura, so that there can be a translation. Because, you know, you can go read something like Shirley MacLaine, can't you? And she'll be talking about the soul or the spirit, or, you know, any number of thousands of authors out there. And they're not talking about what I'm talking about. You see, as long as you're clear in yourself what your soul is and what your spirit is, you don't need to necessarily overwrite it. It might be against your purpose to do so in the end, to pull you away from purpose, I should say.
Sure.
Right.
But what would be good is, and I don't know if this is, now I'll say it. It would be good if when you got like-minded people, such as ourselves. Look, when we get to the point of being able to know and understand and register what the soul is, the spirit is, that it means the same to you as it does to Hannah, as it does to Sam, and everybody else here, that we're talking from the same understanding.
No, talking from the same experience. That's the difference. Because this isn't doctrine.
No,
right?
I meant understanding in the occult sense of,
Yeah,
so the
okay.
esoteric sense, as in standing under what that actually really is,
Yeah.
so that you are same with what it is, and it knows that you know what it is.
That's where we're headed.
Yeah,
That's where we're
Yeah.
headed. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's mesoteric, esoteric.
yeah,
It's all right. Can't hear it. It's okay.
that's okay. He's
Don't worry.
purring away. Yeah.
Don't worry. Yeah, it's okay. Force levels get high. All right.
Yeah.
Let's call it. Okay. Everyone good? Everyone feel
Yes.
settled and yeah, good with how this went.
Yeah,
If there's anything that's left hanging or you need to email me, please do, and
Yeah.
we'll do so. Okay.
yeah, sure.
All right. Good to see you all.
Everybody.
Great to see
Yeah.
everybody. Thank you very much for
Yeah.
inviting me.
Yes, absolutely. Bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye.